Right. Hello and welcome to News Pavilion Live. It's a news-based show, and we had to have it because over the past week or so, there's been so much happening in women's cricket. You talk about Indian cricket, you talk about Australian cricket. We are going to talk about everything, and like most things in women's cricket, it has to be a bit larger than life. We have an ensemble cast here on News Pavilion Live today. Let me welcome Mel Jones, Ananya Upendran, and Yash Lahoti. Hello, everyone. Welcome to News Pavilion.
Thank you so much.
Let's kind of go to the most recent news, that is the India-Australia series. It's almost like everybody wants September to come nearer, wants time to pass soon. Mel, let's start with you. The Australia-India series, it has a test match that everybody wants to see. Tell us more about how the discussions went across to kind of have it in place.
Yeah, look, I'm still pinching myself a little bit as well, and I was involved in it all. It's happened sort of quickly, but it's always a sort of a long process. And I think the process starts by having a multi-format Ashes competition and just seeing how successful that's been between Australia and England. And even it was my first real trip with the Cricket Australia board back in 2019 when we went over to Australia to watch the men's ODI series. We met with the BCCI. We had a magnificent meeting just about all things international cricket. And there was definitely a wanton desire from Saurav and Jay Shah and the likes to really protect and elevate Test match cricket. And it wasn't just for the men. We certainly spoke about the women's game as well. So it's been a little bit of a build-up. And then when we knew that the tour got cancelled because of COVID recently and it got pushed to this season, there was an opportunity and both sides just grabbed it straight away, which is wonderful.
Yeah, Ananya, coming to you, it's going to be a test match which women will be playing. Again, for India, it will be the second test in a span of months because they're playing one against England next month. But tell me how it will be for players, because I think we've lost Ananya. Let's come back to you, Mel, because it's not just any other test. It's a day-night test. It's a pink ball test, which was kind of, when it came to play, when men started playing it, there was a lot of trepidation. But for the women, it seems to have come too soon. What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, I think there's trepidation with all things new, isn't it? Whether it was T20 way back in the day, changing from 8 balls to 6 ball overs, it doesn't really matter what it is, isn't it? I think for the women's side of things, the day-night test match at North Sydney Oval in the Ashes series was just something spectacular to behold. I mean, we had Elise Perry double 100. There's all these things going on, but broadcast-wise, it was just stunning to watch. If you're at ground, to be involved in that as well. The visuals were great. The competition was great. So it was just pretty much a no-brainer to ensure that we can continue that on, because the visibility of day-night test match cricket is just so important for young boys and girls to see the best of the best playing against each other. So that was, first and foremost from an Australian perspective of getting that on. And then we know that there's not a lot of test match cricket in women's cricket. So whether it's red ball or pink ball, it's going to be new for most people.
For most people and for India as well. And Ananya is back. I think she used the DRS to she was out and then she came back in. But Ananya, your thoughts on not really having a lot of game time for women, even in domestic, and then directly playing tests? Your thought on that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having major connectivity issues and stuff. So I think this was one of the worries that, the women haven't played too much. They're going to go directly into a test match. Whether it's the England series and, even the pink ball game against Australia, I think not having too much cricket under their belt, one of the major concerns for me was the fitness, the fact that they haven't trained too much. We're in lockdown for there are restrictions in every state. So, the fact that they haven't trained and they're going after a period of seven-day hard quarantine to England, going to have to play a test match. I'm worried about injuries. I'm worried about the fact that they don't have too much game time under their belt. You do have a lot of players on the slightly older side, players who are recovering from injury. So, yeah, a lot of concerns for India, but I'm hoping that they wrap their players in bubble wrap and get them through that.
Yes, from someone who kind of follows the game so closely, how eager are you to see first of all women in action, and then to see them play, Indian women especially play tests in 2 tests in a span of months?
I think so. The more games, the better. We've seen we've not seen a lot of games happening in the last 14, 16 months, especially since the T20 World Cup. So the more games, the better. And of course, not only India, Australia, England, we would definitely want the other countries also to join and play as many games as possible, play as many limited overs, tests, whatever is possible, play as many games as possible. Taking Ananya's pointer into consideration, I wanted to ask Mel. Mel, just see that we're talking about tests, but none of the three boards which are playing the test this year actually play red ball cricket at their domestic level. So how do you see, because two different ball games, how do you see the players coping up with that particular challenge?
Yeah, look, it's one that sort of raises its head every time an Ashes series comes along. So pretty much there was a decision made a number of years ago that for the marketability and the development of the women's game, that all the funding and resources were going to be put into white ball cricket, particularly T20 cricket. And I think we've seen the benefits of that post the T20 World Cup here in Australia 12 months ago. But I think what that's also allowed people to understand is that there are three magnificent formats in the game. And now that we've elevated women's cricket to a stance where people are actually getting behind it a lot more, we now have this opportunity of now broadening our scope a little bit and coming back to, the heart, the tradition of Test match cricket as well. So it's going to work in reverse, I think, for Test match cricket. We need it on and being played so that then countries that want to get involved a little bit more then need to look at their structures underneath. And I think we're all in a situation where we've got contracted professional players now in a majority of the countries, but they're training more than they're actually playing. So I know from our Players Association here in Australia to Cricket Australia and the players alike, they want to play more. And this is a wonderful opportunity. Yes, it might be in reverse, but hopefully if we can get this going, the visibility of it, great test match, then all of a sudden we start to see red ball cricket at the domestic level and back at club level as well.
For those of you watching, you can kind of ask your questions. We'll take them towards the end of this chat. But Mel, one of the things that everybody of us discusses is the schedule. Like, how do you go about planning which games to be held when? Because we see that in the India Store of Australia, that there's hardly a 5 or 6 day gap when the ODIs end and the test match starts. And it's almost imperative to talk about it because it's a test match. Because otherwise, you actually, in terms of mindset and your body, there's very little to change if you play ODIs, T20s. But how did you have to go about while scheduling the tests in between?
I don't know how they do it. Like I stay away from that one in a lot of ways because the headaches that come from balancing international cricket from the men's and women's programs right across the country so that everyone gets an opportunity to go along and watch is a really tough thing to do. You also need to factor in Australia as a very big country, and we've got a lot of issues with border transfers still with COVID and the likes, and travel in between games. So there's a lot of layers in there. So it's not as easy as what people think, just to say, I'll just put a game there and put a game here kind of thing. So it is tough. The other thing you've got to weigh in as well is that we have the WBBL starting in October. So the beautiful part of this Indian tour is that Indian players can then stay on and play within the WBBL, which we are so very excited for. So to make that transition easy, we're putting the T20s at the end of it, so it's a nicer transition. And then likewise, when you look ahead to the Ashes series, the ODI, it will start with the test match, which is the first time in quite some time for the Ashes, but we'll finish with the ODIs so that both teams can then go into the Women's World Cup as well. So, look, there's a lot of layers there. There's a complexity to it that is way above my pay grade, that's for sure. But I think they've got a reasonably great balance so that we can see women's cricket right across the country.
Yeah, we are almost at a very unusual place where we are, because it's not very usual. We're not very common where you kind of talk tests when you talk about women's cricket. And yes, India is going to play one next month. That's in England, and then they end with that tour with the T20Is. Then there's the 100 where some of the Indian players participate, and then again to go to Australia and start with the ODIs. Your thoughts on the mindset of players? What will it be like?
I think so, because the players have not played cricket for a long time. The mindset will be that, okay, we're getting good amount of cricket. That's going to be the mindset that yes, we want to play as much cricket as possible. There is a ODI World Cup. there are multiple tests this particular year. So the mindset is always going to be going there and performing well in whatever formats it is. So start with the ODIs, then start with the test, then the ODIs, then T20s. 5 players from India playing the 100, and then go along. Most likely, both the Aussies and Indian players will directly travel down to the UK, then play. To Australia, play that series, the WBBL, a lot of things. So and then Australia, England have the Ashes. So it looks like a jam-packed season for the big 3 countries.
Indeed, and Mel, the choice of venues for Test cricket, Manuka Oval in Canberra for the Ashes, and then the WACA in Perth for this India series. Should Indian players be wary of the pace bowling attack of Australia from right away?
You could say that we probably learnt from having the first game of the World Cup on a turning deck at the showgrounds in Sydney, and that's not going to happen again, pretty much. So the markers know there's a flat deck; it's a road, basically, typically. So there'll be runs on offer there. So bowling attacks, beware. You're going to have to be very patient in the way in which you go about things there. And the WACA will be interesting because I know we always talk about the pace and bounce at the WACA. And that was sort of old school WACA. Now, can they sort of revitalise it to have that old school feel about it? I'm hoping so, because, and then not just because you want to give Australia an advantage, but I think there's something exciting about the Australian pace bowling attack at the moment when you've got the youngsters coming through like Valemic and Brown and Perry and the likes, and then you put in Julian Goswami. Like what an opportunity for her, later in her career to have a deck that's really suitable to her as well. And I've fielded it backward point to Mitali Raj, and the ball pings off the bat. So I'm tipping, a deck like the WACA as well, she'll be licking her lips a little bit too.
And then there's the doctor as well.
There is.
There's
pitches, but play, isn't there? Yeah, 100%. Look, there's nothing better. I had a childhood dream come true during the T20 World Cup because I wasn't commentating the game between South Africa and England at the WACA. So I sat on the grassed hill underneath the scoreboard and just sat back and watched a brilliant game of cricket. So I'm hoping in between my breaks commentary that I'll get that opportunity again because it's a magnificent ground to watch any kind of cricket at.
There is a comment from a fan who says that WACA is going to be the new GABA.
Ooh, fingers crossed. Maybe that's the new start of the Australian women's summer is to have a test match at the WACA. The tour matches for the men used to start over there at Lilac Hill way back in the day. So maybe that's a nice new tradition to get kick-started.
Australia announced 2 fixtures for their entire summer. The Ashes schedule came out first, then the Indian schedule. But there's a common factor in both of these. Both these series are multi-format series, and the Ashes has always been that the winner getting decided based on the overall points at the end of the series, whereas it's not yet sure if the Indian series is going to be that way. Yash, let me take your thoughts on that first. What should it be going forward? Should it be a multi-format series where the winners decided based on the points, or you're okay with having individual winners?
I think so that all the series going forward, like the ICC should make this rule that, there should be 1 test, 3 ODIs, 3 T20s minimum, and you make it a multi-format series, every series going further. And I'm sure that India, Australia, England would not mind. Australia, England are already playing this, and India would not mind joining them in this multi-format series. Mel, do you feel that it's going to be a points-based system?
Look, it's an interesting one. I think if you have a points-based system, you need a trophy to play for, don't you? And at the moment, there isn't one. So maybe we need to put it out to everyone to say, if there was a trophy like the Ashes that we have in the England-Australia series, do we need to create a trophy for a multi-format competition, or do we just have this sort of like little mini ones within the mini system itself?
So just like there is a Border Gavaskar trophy, should there be one trophy introduced for the women India-Australia series?
Potentially, isn't it? I mean, and I certainly don't mean to think that you just have to do an overlay of what the men have done and bring it into the women's game. I think we could be pretty creative in this space and potentially come up with something, sort of new and unique, just like the multi-format series itself, that is really, I guess, reflective of the women's game. I think the thing for me is that women's cricket for the last 5-7 years is elevated in terms of the visibility. So names are becoming really common right across the world, but we still don't have an understanding of the history of the game as much. So Marg Jennings captained the Australian women's team at the last Test match at the WACA. It was back in 1977 against India. Do people know Marg Jennings? No, but they should. Captain multiple World Cups and the like. So maybe we can look back into the past a little bit to try and, so I suppose, retell some of those stories that we've never had the opportunity of hearing before. So I think there's probably, again, smarter people than I out there with a few really, really good ideas.
Yeah, and it's also from where we stand, I think the individual series works in the sense that the focus is on the format and that series, and it's not that you preserve a situation to kind of get a result in your favor, like it was thought to be, that the Ashes Test most of the times people went for a draw so as to not lose the upper hand. So that won't be a case when you have individual series results there. Yeah. Right. Moving ahead, once again, we'll kind of talk about the Indian contracts. Yash, let me take your thoughts there. There have been new players who come into the system. Your thoughts on the contracts handed out by the BCCI. Remember, it's still September 2021, so we're almost halfway through.
So basically, there were just 2 series in there. One the South Africa one the England, and say the half Australia series. So it's basically the contracts for 2.5 series the entire year. But I understand that contracts are very important for the entire development of a player. Richa is a very good addition. She's shown bright colors at the T20 World Cup last year, even in the recent South Africa series. I'm a bit surprised by Ekta Bist's omission, because she's a wonderful player. She's one of the best left-arm spinners the country has. So I'm a bit surprised with that why has Ekta been left out. But I just hope that she either plays 3 ODIs or 5 T20Is in the in the period, and she gets that grade C contract at least.
Right, we'll probably kind of throw the house open. One last question for you, Mel. Like, when you were scheduling when the schedule was probably made for the summer, was there a thought of kind of not overburdening the Australian players, especially given that there's a World Cup at the end of the season?
Yeah, look, it's one of those things that you're always very mindful of now, isn't it? I mentioned before, we don't want them training more than they're playing, but then all of a sudden you jam pack a summer like at the moment, and then the S&C, all the science heads, get a little bit panicky about bowling workloads and the like. So I know from our perspective, we actually added the extra player in Darcy Brown to the squad so that you can sort of help manage her, particularly as a young fast bowler, coming through, and know that there is a very big summer ahead, so that there's you can sort of look after players and manage them through that. I think it's going to be an interesting phase, I think, for all national bodies when there's more and more games coming through, just to make sure that we can keep our very best players on the park for as long as possible. And then there's the shift in formats as well. So all of a sudden, I think that shift in formats, but also the fact that they're in hotel quarantining as well. So you have those 2 layers over the top of things. And what I think, if anything, it means to me is that you might not be in the Australian squad at the moment, and if you're playing WBBL, just be ready, because in the blink of an eye, something could happen and you could find yourself in an Australian team travelling very, very quickly, or in and amongst it all. So that, I think, is really, really exciting, because ideally what you want at the end of the day is competition pushing up the Australian players all the time.
Yeah, fair
so
point.
I have 2 questions. One is that ICC has already told that the next 2 World Cups, the Men's World Cup in November and the Women's World Cup in February, March, both are going to have, say, a 22-23 player contingent they can carry, just because of the COVID regulations and everything. The Australian contracts or the Indian contracts, they are not even of 22 players. Like, the players are pretty less. So how do you see that 6-7 players, whosoever left, or whosoever might have to travel, how does any board look at the training for those players for the entire year?
Yeah, look, I think for, particularly from Cricket Australia's perspective, is that there's a really strong alignment with all our states and territories and all our state programs and WBBL programs. So everyone sort of has an understanding, and then the selectors and the head of performance certainly talk quite regularly about where players are coming through. So the recent tour to New Zealand, so we had Molly Strano, those likes that aren't contracted players but travelled with the team. So you sort of get a bit of an understanding. They have extended squads as well, which they had prior coming into that tour as well. So I think it was about 22 before the squads were selected. And so once those squads are selected, players then know that they're in the mix going forward as well. So it's about sort of looking at the timetable ahead and planning out a little bit, and just keeping players across that. So communication is absolutely critical.
And do you see in that pink ball test, we have Brown, Willemine, Perry and Shute, all four of them just going against the Indian batters?
Yeah, pick them all. Yep. Quicks galore. Don't worry about the spin. No, not at all. Not at all. Look, I think it's a wonderful place to be in within Australian cricket at the moment because of the variety within the bowling attack. Yes, you've got some out-and-out quicks in Willemine and Brown, and that's exciting. But also you've also got some exceptionally talented Indian players as well who will adjust to pace very, very quickly. So you need your Megan Shutes, you need your Elise Perrys, you need all that variety, and then into the spinners of Johnson and Molyneux and Warren and the like. So who would want to be a selector coming into this test match when everyone's champing at the bit to try and get the baggy green on? But you sort of know that there's only probably 4 or 5 bowling spots available. So there'll be a lot of conjecture, a lot of social media bantering, I think, coming into the test match.
I'm almost in envy of the pace bowling strength that Australia has. You kind of throw in a Darcy Brown, you had a Maitland Brown at the start of the season. Yep. Your reserves are all pacers, and that's kind of a point to be envious about. Right, let's take some questions that we might have. Radha Gupta, thanks for joining. Mel, to what extent does there need to be a level up when it comes to training for tests? Anything new that is specific to tests? Yeah, look,
a level up. I don't know if it's a level up, because I think I'm speaking on behalf of the players here. They might be listening in going, what's she on about? As soon as you get to a test match, everyone just rises again, because it's what you grow up watching and playing in the backyard and the like. So I think the level up is more of a cricket smarts and an actual technique. Yeah, you got to learn to leave a little bit more, you got to be a little bit more patient. But because we don't play a lot of red ball cricket at domestic level, there still needs to be that embracing of what your skill sets are as well. So it's a tricky balance. So I think it's more game plan and being able to stick to a game plan, but then also, which we can see in a shorter format, but we just got to lengthen it out a little bit, be brave enough to be able to back your own game and roll with it within the test match arena. We saw that with Elisa Healy opening up for Australia in the last test match over in England at Taunton. And she just played to her natural strength, but she didn't get too carried away with it at the same point in time. So I think that'll be the biggest challenge for coaches and leaders within the team, is to say to, let's say, Shafali Verma gets picked for the test match. You don't want to take away all what is great about her, but at the same point in time, you've got to try and get her head around the ability of, you've got time. And if the more time you're out there, the more runs in you're certainly going to score.
Yeah, fair point that. Pooja Gosika asks, Australia has many advantages playing at home. What does Indians have and positives to take while entering the ground?
Well, one, that they'll have played a test match against England, fairly recently. So they'll have had the whites on. They will have had the lead up to that as well. So that'll be in their back pocket, whereas the Australians haven't played a test match since the last Ashes over in England. Was that 2019? So that's certainly an advantage. And I think there's some, I don't know, sometimes people might say it's not an advantage, but there's some history coming up too. This could be Mitali Raj and Geelong Goswami's last test match. And when you've got just iconic players like that potentially playing in their last test match, you just know everyone else around them lifts, because they want them to finish on the ultimate high as well. So I think they've got that in their back pocket as well, which would be pretty exciting.
Yes, your thoughts on this, because there's not much background to select a team for India, whereas Australia, of course, even if it's a long time back, they have had a team that has played in recent time a Test cricket. So, for India, what are the positives and how do they kind of go about selecting their 11?
I think so. India's always been good in the longer format of the game than the shorter formats of the game. So and the players are more conducive because till at least 2018, 3 seasons they had 3-day tournaments. So red ball cricket was there, and all the players who are currently in the team have played red ball cricket for a good 2-3 years at the domestic level. Of course, there has been no practice in the last 2 years, but they have done that, and of course they will be coming on back of a England test at least, so they will have something to show on the field. And of course, um, uh, it's always going to be a positive attitude. Just go out there and try and beat the Aussies.
Right, let's take the next one. Pooja once again asks, what are most Australians pulling out of the 100? Why are most Australians pulling out of the 100?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's scheduling, unfortunately, a little bit. So there is the fact that the Indian series is now so early in our season. So we're looking, the sort of mid to late September, and the 100 finishing so late, and then having to quarantine. There is a want and desire, particularly of the the Australian-based players, to make sure that they're ready to go for the start of the Indian series. And there's I suppose too is that there's always, and speaking from a player's perspective, when you sign up for a team, you want to give it your all. So going over for half a competition, that might have been discussions that they've had with their 100 teams as well, where they're not 100 teams, they prefer a player for the entire season rather than just for half as well. So it's a tricky one, and I think it's more because of us trying to get back into playing international cricket off the back of COVID, that it is one that I think we need to be really, really mindful of and get together to protect major domestic T20 competition. So that I'm talking about the WBBL, if and when the women's sort of challenge IPL gets up and going in the 100, so that we can try and protect that as much as possible, because that gives visibility, that gives playing opportunities, that gives career opportunities to players, that I think is vital for the women's game.
Yeah, fair point. Let's move on. Prajin M. Prashad asks, what are the matchups that you are looking forward to in tests? Let Yash, your thoughts on that? Matchups in tests?
I think so. Megan Shoot versus Smriti Mandana should be one of the matchups to look out for. Both the players love facing each other, and it should be also just put in Julan Goswami against Meg Lannon. You still remember that 2017 delivery that she bowled, and those
I
are
don't
the
remember
matchups.
that one. No.
Very convenient. Very convenient.
Yeah, I think that's.
Which are the matchups you are looking forward to?
No, very much those two. I mean, there's pieces, isn't there? Like I look at Meg Lanning, who is one of the preeminent batters going around world cricket, and for her not to have scored a Test match 100 yet. So you sort of look at, it's not just one matchup; it'll be that whole bowling unit for India, sort of combining, I guess, more so than anything else. I'm also looking at the matchup of captaincy and tactics. Like we said, there's not a lot of Test match cricket. And so when you come down to it, we had this incident during the last Ashes series about taking the new ball, because we had a documentary done on the series. And so, yeah, for me, I think I'm a traditionalist at heart. So just looking at the way in which the captains go about, 4-day cricket, I think that's going to be a pivotal one as well.
Right. Let me kind of because there's an Aussie in the room, and every kind of matchup has a seamer in it, and I want to see a spinner in Poonam Yadav. So throw Poonam Yadav the ball. Let Alyssa Healy be there till then. So Poonam Yadav versus Alyssa Healy will be something I will be looking at. Before closing this. Yeah. Sorry.
Coming from Alyssa Healy, Mel, it's just announced that Alyssa Healy will be opening the batting with Shafali Verma for the Sixers. How do you see that opening combination?
Wow. And it probably means Ash Gardner's at 3, so look out opposition there somewhere along the track, isn't it? Look, is that probably one of the most mouth-watering, opportunities of watching. It's just someone who's been there, done it at the top of their game in Healy, and someone, I know she's the number one T20 batter in the world, Verma, at the moment, but she's still so young and learning her game. There'll be quite a few games at North Sydney Oval too. It's not the biggest ground in the world, so kids outside the park will be waiting for a lot of balls coming their way. Look, it's just, it's exciting, and that's what the WBBL is all about. It's, best players in the world, attracting, great crowds and entertaining. So that's, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's a good name to close the show on. Shefali Verma, she may be opening the batting on the field, but it's a good name to take when you kind of wind down. Yash, your final thoughts on Shefali's test debut, which we probably will see in England next month?
I hope so. I really would want to see Shefali and Smriti open against the English side. It's going to be mouth-watering. She's the only player potentially who can change the game in the first hour of the day. So I'm hoping for a great debut for Shefali.
So you're expecting her to open up?
Yeah. I completely expect Shefali to open with Smriti.
I was just going to ask you, Mel, what would you prefer? Would you prefer Shefali, the opener, or someone who plays at 5'6"?
Yeah. Depends on whose hat I put on a little bit here. And I think my hat, just as a punter watching, that would be outstanding to watch. I suppose you look at a Poonam Raut, and can they set a foundation that a Verma can then come in with an older ball and then do some damage in the middle order. That's the other one I'd be looking at as well. So either, both pretty good.
Yeah, all these mysteries will be solved in the coming few days in the month of June. There's a lot of cricket action. Thank you, Mel Jones, for joining us on this show. Thanks, Yash, for your time. Thank you, everyone who's tuned into News Pavilion Live. We will come back to you with some news about the live cricket as well when June starts. So join us back then. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.